Hello again, everybody. It's Michelle Starr with my Mysti-Stories. Um, this is episode number 7, and the theme is regarding major healing meditations, visions, and dreams. A lot of the stories that I've given you already have been more along the lines of fun and maybe interesting. But this series of stories is not. So I just want to tell you up front that when you are working to heal yourself of trauma or negativity that you perceive within yourself, it's not necessarily pretty. Okay, you're digging for truth, you're digging out negativity and dross, and it can be unpleasant. I almost want to say scary, but it really isn't scary because when you're on this path, when you're working through issues, healing yourself, you have guidance that's always there. My guidance has always been very considerate of my psychic sensitivity. Um, so anything that was presented to me in meditation or in dreams has always been considerate and I want to say gentle. Um, so having said that, just know that it's all good and it is what it is. Okay. So, just a reminder, I think I read this quotation by Joseph Campbell once before, but I want to reiterate this quote because it's so applicable in the stories that I'm about to give you. So this one is: the cave you fear to enter holds the treasure you seek. And what that means is anything you're afraid of, there's a reason why you're afraid. And that needs to be examined, and we need to do our own introspection around that, because underneath the fear, once that is faced, then you have more power, personal power, and strength, immense strength. Okay, so the first story I want to share with you is something that happened back when my roommates and I shared a house. There were 3 of us women. All 3 of us had psychic abilities in one way or another. The one woman was a channeler and allowed angels to come through, and even my higher self came through her and spoke to me, who I had already met in meditation. So I knew that it was valid and real. It wasn't just somebody with a hoax. Okay, so we lived in this house together, and one day I was having trouble. I had a headache. Now, I don't normally get headaches, so for me to have a headache that persisted was really unusual. Now, this was in the mid-80s, so I was already around 40. And the headache that I did yoga, I did visualization, I did healing energy on my head, and I could not get rid of that headache. So, since I couldn't seem to do it myself, I asked for help. So I asked my channeler roommate if she would see if she could see what was going on. So I was sitting in a chair at the dining room table, and she came around behind me and had her hands on my head. And then, of course, I couldn't see her because she was standing behind me, but I could tell, her hands were above my head. And then she left the room suddenly and went out into the kitchen and turned on the faucet and was washing her hands. So it's like, well, what just happened? I had no idea. So she said that um, she saw inside of my head this entity, and she started to pull it out. And it was slimy. It had the face like a wolf with fangs, and was like pretty ugly. And then it had a long tail. So she said these entities can bite. So that's why she ran into the kitchen and washed it down the drain, because these are energy beings that water is the ultimate cleanser. Okay. So what had happened was, when I was growing up, I had a mother that, my poor mom, she went through so much physical trauma. I remember she wanted to have her teeth pulled so that she could have dentures made for her mouth. And the dentist just butchered her mouth, even broke her jaw. And I remember being a kid and seeing her lying on the couch. She had been using Kleenex to clear out the blood from her mouth, and she was propping her head up because it was too painful to lie down with. It just created too much pressure. And then when my twin brother and I were born, um, she was 23. And back then, this was in 1946, okay, uh, they did not do testing for the fetus. And so my parents didn't know they were having twins. They had no clue. So my mother gave birth to me, and then the doctor said, wait a minute, there's another one. So my mom had always wanted a son because she already had my sister, and, one girl, one boy would have been nice, but here I am, the bonus, right? So she had some difficulty. My brother was only 4 pounds when he was born, um, when we were born. So my mom was still in the hospital. He was in an incubator, and she was having trouble. She was hemorrhaging, and she was in pain, and she kept calling the nurses and saying, there's something wrong. And the nurses just kept saying, oh, it's just your period starting. That's natural after giving birth. But she was in such pain, and she persisted. And they finally called the doctor in, and he found that she had a fibroid tumor the size of an orange. And we think that it was on the side within my mother's womb that my brother was on, and um, got nutrients that my brother should have. So then she had to have surgery, and at the age of 23, they performed a complete hysterectomy rather than just taking pieces, parts. They took everything, which by the time I was 4 and 5 years old, threw her into premature menopause. So her hormones were crazy. She was just a mess. She got mean. She was ritually spanking my brother and me every day. She would make us take down our pants and lean over the toilet and either use some instrument like a stick or a yardstick or something. And if she couldn't find anything, she would use her hand. So, when that happens every day for a while, I used to cry in the beginning. And then after a while, it's like, this is the way it is. I'm not going to give her the satisfaction of crying. So I turned that off. And it was just my brother and me. Finally, one day, she had us in the bathroom, getting ready for our ritual. And my sister's voice boomed from another room saying, "Will you quit beating those twins?" And my mom just woke up. She said, "Oh," and that was it. She never did that again. That doesn't mean she didn't spank us or smack us around, but it meant it wasn't a ritual anymore. So she had such a difficult time um, getting her hormones straightened around, and so she used to yell a lot. And I was the quiet one back then. It's hard to believe now, but I was very quiet and extremely shy. And I seemed to be the one that was around. So I was the one that got yelled at a lot. My sister and my parents fought a lot. They argued, but she was very strong-willed, and she would leave. My sister would just leave the house, where my brother and I were too little. We couldn't escape. So even into my teens, when I started dating, my mother was always yelling at me. Well, this energy of her anger being vented on me, and this is a lesson for anyone: don't vent on anyone ever. Um, if you need to release anger, talk to your higher self or your angel guides or anybody, but not another human. It does no one any good. And we all need to have our individual relationships with spirit side so that we can have that guidance to get through our challenges. So what had happened, all of that yelling and anger thrust at me accumulated inside of me. So I was a very receptive person, the feminine polarity. So I internalize things rather than acting out. So when my roommate pulled that entity out, that was an accumulation of her anger and yelling. But there's more to the story. This thing had a long tail on it and it was wrapped around my spine. So when my roommate pulled that out, I could feel a new emptiness, an opening, a lightness in my spinal column. And she said that this thing, this monster, was in my head, and then its tail wrapped around my spine. So I felt bad because I'd already been doing 15 years of yoga, and I couldn't understand why, with all the work I did. Now, I did yoga sometimes for 5, 6, 7 hours at a time, one practice session. Sometimes I'd get up in the middle of the night. I just needed that kind of emotional healing and release of whatever is in here. So I felt bad that I couldn't get rid of that entity myself. But my roommate said that all of that yoga that I did loosened the tail on that being so that when she pulled it out, it it took it all out. It's like getting the stem on a dandelion plant, right? So my headache was gone and I felt a new openness in my spine. And I think that having that in my head impacted my anger. See, I was um, a receptacle. I was a repository for my whole family's anger. So I was like a sponge, and I was allowing all of that to come inside of me. So all of that had to be released. All of it had to be healed. Um, it's not easy to take on that kind of assignment, but it was necessary for the work that I'm doing now, and to clear my karma and to be prepared and awaken. I'm an early indigo, so I had to clear it all out before the masses, so to speak, so that I could help others uh, with their clearing. So that was an amazing experience in itself. It brings back that memory of that thing. So no more headaches. All right, so this next one is also, and that's why I called these major healing meditations, visions, and dreams, because these were really impactful. Everything I've told you up to now has been impactful, but these were seriously impactful, okay? This next one happened later in the 90s, all right? I was teaching a private yoga class in the basement of my house. It was a finished basement, and carpeted and very nice. So I had private students that came for class, and one woman, we'd gone through all the poses and the breathing and She was in Shavasana, the relaxation at the end of practice, and I was in meditation. And what happened was I had a vision, and I saw myself tied to a stake, and I was burning. I was, uh, it was a witch burning. Apparently, I was um, uh, a witch in that life. And I'm going to talk a little bit about other lifetimes, so that if you do or don't subscribe to it, it's okay. It doesn't matter. This was my experience, and it's a way that I can share with you um, what it's like and what it's about to have um, memory of other life streams. And all of the memories that I've had, almost all of them, have been in order to heal that lifetime. So this was no exception. There I was, standing and burning. And now, when I mentioned early on that my guides were always um, considerate of my psyche, I meant that because I had no emotion when I saw this. When I saw myself, there's my kitty girl. Um, when I saw myself burning at the stake, I didn't feel anything. I wasn't afraid. I wasn't in pain. The expression on my face in the vision was a grimace of ow, majorly, but I didn't feel anything. And it's like, oh, there I am burning at the stake. Fancy that. So I had offered prayer. I believe in prayers and visualizations. Um, we have so much power accessible to us that a lot of times we don't use, and we don't use to the fullest extent. And hey, I'm still working on it, and I've been doing this. Well, this is my 50th year, my Golden Jubilee, doing yoga. So I prayed for healing because I noticed something. I was doing yoga and I was finished and I was meditating afterwards. And I recognized that I didn't have um, a man in my life. And the ones that I had, they really were not good relationships. So I also noticed that I didn't have abundance like I always wanted. So I prayed and I asked for help and a way to heal those issues, because um, if we don't have what we want, if we're not happy, then there's I knew I was blocking. For a long time I blamed God. You're keeping money from me, you're keeping relationship from me. And that doesn't work because it's not God's fault. It was um, my blockages. So I asked for healing. I recognized that it was up to me to open and heal whatever blockages there were. And at that time, I didn't know what blockages there were. So then it was not long after that that I had this vision during meditation. So I asked more for healing of that issue, um, because burning at the stake is not a fun thing. It's something that causes fear and anxiety. And when we have a trauma in another lifetime and it's not healed in that lifetime, then that emotion, that issue is still in us. It's in our soul. So it needs to be neutralized, recognized, and released. So that's what being on the mystic path, um, at least the initial stages, is about, is healing. We call that the shadow. So the healing of it was phenomenal. Um, I worked in a law firm at that time, and I was downtown, big city, not too big, but city. And I knew intuitively that day I was going to heal around this issue. I I didn't know how, but I knew it was going to happen that day. So Spirit was already priming me for the experience. All right. So when you're in touch with your guidance, you get these messages. It can be a gut feeling, it can be just an intuitive knowing. You might hear words, you might see something visually, you might see an article on a magazine that triggers off, oh, that's going to happen today. So I was working, and this building was 45, 48 stories high downtown, and I was up on, I think, the 44th floor. It was pretty high. So we couldn't use the elevators all the way down because of this fire drill, but they had people in the red hats standing next to the um, stairwells, the doors to the stairwells, so that we could go down. And we were just supposed to go down 3 floors. We didn't have to go all the way down and outdoors, um, because it was just uh, the way they handled it. They were showing us. So if it were real, then of course we would go all the way down. So we had this fire drill. I'm walking towards this fellow that had on the red hat. So he was one of the um, fellows that were um, directing us through these doors and to go down 3 stairs and then wait there. So as I go through this doorway, I suddenly became aware of that witch life where I uh, saw myself burning at the stake. And I recognized that part of me was going down this stairwell, another part of me was walking to the stake itself, where they were going to set me on fire. So then is when I became afraid. I was shaking. Everything that people were saying, because people were joking about burn, baby, burn, because we were going down these stairs and everybody was having fun around it. And for me, I'm hearing the crowd in that lifetime saying, these things like burn, burn, and so scary when you have no control over what's happening to you. You're a prisoner and you're going to die, and you're going to die because there's no way out. So I was terrified, and I went down the 3 floors and waited there, and then they said we could take the elevator back up to our floor. So I'm standing in front of the elevator doors, and they open, and it's pretty full. So they're saying, "Oh no, you have to stay here and burn." It's like, oh, geez. So finally, I got on an elevator and went back to my desk, and I was shaking, trembling, just so afraid. And so I couldn't stay at my desk. Um, had to get away from my desk where there were people. So I went to the ladies' room, and I just cried and cried. And one of the attorneys came in, a woman attorney, and I was embarrassed. I said, "Oh, this fire drill just brought back a bad memory," which was completely true. But nobody seemed to mind, and I've I felt like as I cried, I could feel this energy coming up as though I was vomiting energy. Um, and then it was gone. So that was like a ball of fear, a ball of memory that just erupted up and out. So it was released, it was gone, and I was spent. I was just so exhausted from that experience. So I went back to my desk. And do you remember the dream where I talked about there was an apparition next to me and the whole room was golden energy? Same thing, the whole room. And this was a big office where all of the energy in the room was golden. And I just kind of relaxed at my desk. And as spirit is so considerate, and they can arrange things. So the attorneys were nice that afternoon. I sometimes would have to work for some that were not, that were older and old school and power over, and women are whatever. You get the picture. So the attorneys were very nice, and I hardly had any work to do. So I could just kind of integrate that experience and then be calm and finished with it. So that was like a major, when I say major healing meditations, visions, and dreams, that was major, because much of the fear that I had, now you have to recognize when you're storing fear or anger, you're going to emanate that, whether you're intentionally doing it or not, but you're going to be transmitting that energy, and you're going to attract like energy. So you send out anger, you're going to get it back to you in some shape or form from somebody else or an eruption of your own. So now that was done. So just a little bit about other lifetimes and one way you can look at it to help you understand what's happening. All right. So if you look at this little disco ball, it's a miniature one. It has a string on it. Okay. So if you imagine a real disco ball, this end of it would be connected to electricity above the ceiling, right? So then this might show, and then the ball is there and twirls on the wire. So imagine that electricity is the source, the creator being the source, and that this um, string here is your higher self. And then if you can see, these are all little segments all around this ball. The whole sphere has these segments of mirrors. So if you imagine each mirror as a lifetime, so you have all these lifetimes going on all at the same time because they're all connected to your higher self, and your higher self just uh, takes its consciousness into each lifetime. And then when, like, say, here I am incarnate in this lifetime, well, say that's this lifetime right here. Okay. Now, there might have been, oh, I just remembered another lifetime that I could tell you about. I'm going to write that down. Um, so when, these are all next to each other, and although they're all going on at the same time, we are, when we're born, we set up that memory block that we don't remember all these other lifetimes. We don't remember that we are a piece of God from the ocean of consciousness. Okay. So the reason we do that is so that we can completely focus into this lifetime and do the work that we came to do. So we plan loosely. We plan what we want to learn, what we want to develop in ourselves, and all of that. So now what happens when we have memory or recall of another lifetime? It might be like very close by, or it might have been so impactful, a life that was so impactful that it needs healing, and it comes up for review and neutralizing the emotion around it, recognizing the why, and then letting it go and moving on. So when that happens, it's called bleed through. That other lifetime has bled into this one. So that's how I happen to remember this life. And I'll just, it's not long. I'll just tell it to you now. Right around this time when I was doing this work, my guides channeled through and told me that now that I was 40 years old, I needed to become aware that in another lifetime, when I was 40 years old, I was a college professor. I was very intellectual, so I didn't have much compassion or empathy at all in that life. Or perhaps I had the capacity, but I never tuned into it. I never developed it, never utilized it. So I was a loner, and I lived like in an ivory tower, and just worked with more intellectual pursuits with teaching college. So since I was so intellectual in that life, I was out of balance, and I went mad. I I just lost it. So I was 40 years old when that happened, and my guides told me when something like that happens, you need to be careful. 4 years before that life, so from 46 on, and 4 years after that life, being aware of emotion and intellect and balance and compassion, because I had a similar personality in that life as I do this one. And the danger is that life actually impacting this life to the degree where I don't develop what I came to do in this life. So that was a great warning for me, and I did watch, and I actually could feel that man come to me, and he was negative and power over. And I would just say, hey, I'm working on something else in this life, go back to your life. But he didn't leave me alone, so I finally had to do like a cord cutting with him, which maybe I'll do a video on that. I don't know. Maybe you already know what that is. But there can be dangers around this when you're sensitive and you're working on healing to a vast degree. I wanted to heal as far as possible, clear my karma out and just be free of that to move forward and grow into bigger and better things. Okay. So that's what happened with burning at the stake and my professor life. So, hey, I was smart in one life, huh? All right. So this brings us to another difficult story, and it's part of the basis for my book. Okay, my book is called I Forgive You, Daddy, Yoga and the Angels Healed Me, along with astrology, channeling, dreams, past life recall, psychicism, telepathy, walk-ins, and the whales. So I've already mentioned the whales in another episode. So the angels that I'm speaking of there are the angels that came through when my friend was channeling. And I also started to see angels. I could see them around. I could see their colors. They're multiple colors. They're not just white, and there are silver ones and red. And so anyway, this story started with a dream. It was a dream that I had. I had gone to my father. He had an office. Now, I did not see him in the dream, but I knew that I had gone to see him, and then the dream started when I came back. But I had gone to see him to confront him with the sexual abuse that he did when I was starting at a year old. So when I had done that and I came back, there were two friends of mine that were in the dream, and both of them were healers. They worked as healers and still do. So when I came back, I wailed. I just, 3 times. And I felt that release again, like that other lifetime when I was burnt at the stake. And, I went to the ladies' room and basically vomited that energy. So that happened again, but it took 3 contractions of my gut to release it. And they were asking me, "What's wrong? What's wrong?" And I said, "Well, I just confronted my father with this, and he billed me for his time. He refused to accept that that's what he did, and he billed me for the time that I spent with him." So that was the dream. It was crazy. So the next day, I had plans to have lunch with the one woman who was in my dream. She was also a yoga teacher. And I met her for lunch, and while we were having lunch, I told her about the dream. Well, she worked in a center, a spiritual center, less than a block away from the restaurant where we were having lunch. So she said, well, after we finish here, we'll just walk down there and we'll do meditation and see what we can come up with, what happens in your meditation. So we finished lunch and then we walked to this center where her space was. It was in the basement again. um, so we sat down and I went into meditation and all of a sudden the left side of my face started to get very hot and it didn't really hurt, but it was very uncomfortable. My ear was uncomfortable, the side of my face, and I mentioned it to her and she says, "Well, it's all red. It's all inflamed." So I went back into meditation and I saw my father. He was young and he was coming into this room. It was very dark. He worked in machining. He was a tool and die maker and very good at it, but I don't know if that's where we were or not because it was very hard to see because it was dark. But it was that kind of a room. I mean, there was equipment around. The floor I could tell was black, like where he did have his job. It was like that because it was like maybe a tarred surface so that it was softer for them to stand on. So he was coming at me, he was coming towards me, and I looked down at my body and I was naked. And I could tell I was about a year old, maybe a little bit more, but just right around that age because I was young. I was really a baby. So he came over to me and he was using my face for his own pleasure. So I told you in the beginning that this was some stuff that was unpleasant. But like I said before, where is that? Um, the cave you fear to enter holds the treasure you seek. um, so I was kind of blown away that that happened, but it started the healing process with my father. Now, I had a very strong spiritual bond with my dad. I adored him. I always adored him. And even in this experience, I was trying to push him away. I said, Daddy, no, no. And he was too strong, but I could still feel love for him because he was my dad. And given the yelling and the beatings we got from my mom, he was the parent of choice, right? Wow, what a choice, sexuality or beatings. But that was my life back then, and it's all healed, so not to worry, all right? So I I had more memories of him using my body. Now there was no sex per se. It was more just using my body. All right. Just a little girl. And so I started meditating and praying and asking for healing. And over time, that spiritual bond was stronger than the issue that happened to me with him. So I forgave him. Um, it was just something that happened, okay, that's the way it was. Now, a little bit of background on him, bless his heart. My mom went through traumas, but so did my dad. He was in World War II. He was in the Navy, and he saw things that he would never tell any of us. He told us one thing. I think he told my mom, and then she revealed it to us kids as we were older. So I'm not going to tell you what it was. It just was a really nasty thing that happened, not to him, but he saw what happened during the war. So it was, my dad was an extremely creative person. He was a musician. He played the banjo for my mom. He would serenade her. He played the harmonica. Now, he never played music around us kids because he was so extremely shy. And so we never got to hear that, but my mom told us how wonderful he was and how she enjoyed his serenading her. He also was a semi-professional roller skater, and he had a partner that he would twirl above his head and skate, dance skates with her. So he had these amazing fiberglass skates. They were expensive, but they were so quiet. We used to go skating on Saturday mornings at our town hall. They had a gymnasium there, and they would put the powder down so that we could skate on that floor. It wouldn't be so slippery. And my dad let us use his skates one time just to experience what they were like, having that quiet. So so he had it rough back then too, and many people did. So I'm not saying I'm the only one that this has ever happened to. I know others have. I'm just telling you this is part of the path of healing. Not everybody can deal with it to heal it. Uh, the the person that's gone through trauma needs to have a container within them that's strong enough to handle these memories, to handle the emotional content, and to release it. So it's not easy for anybody, but when this is like a cleanup life for me, or it was. Now that's been done for a long time. But when you have a cleanup life, these traumas come up and you have to heal them. That's partly what I came to do in this life. And then as I'm clear, then I can help others. That gives me clarity, clairvoyance, clairsentience, and those things. So anyway, I kept notes all this time. Uh, so that's how I happened to write my book. And it took me 20 years because now there's another set of circumstances that are revealed in this book that has to do with angels and initiation and all that. So I'm not going to give that to you. It would be so long, it would just be too much. But this book is only what, 120 pages, 125, 26 pages. So and it's not expensive if you want to buy it. I could give you that information. You can contact me at michellestaryoga@gmail.com if you have any interest in reading the rest of my story, because it's even more phenomenal than any of the stories that I have given you or that will be giving you in these 9 episodes. So you might not even believe it that it is so mm, spiritual. All right. So, oh, there's another story that I wanted to give you that happened a little later on. It was still in the late 80s, but it's kind of, as I told you about that negative thought form that my roommate took out of my head and rushed to the kitchen sink to wash it down the drain. This one is not quite like that, but along the same lines of psychic attack or psychic vampirism. All right. So I lived in my house with my two roommates, and my roommate that did the channelings would have channeling sessions sometimes and would invite people over. And one night she had people over, and there was a fellow there that swam with the dolphins all the time. I think he lived in Hawaii, but he was visiting the States. So it was pretty interesting. I thought, wow, to be able to swim with the dolphins, he must be really enlightened because, dolphins are high vibration, high frequency, and they they're not going to be around somebody who's nasty, right? But we were sitting in the living room. He was on the couch across on the other side of the living room, and I was on I don't know, upholstered chair, I guess, on this side of the living room. And I looked over and I saw, now this is an energy that I saw, but it was his hand, um, an energetic hand coming from across the room, and it was white. And it came across the room and reached in and was taking energy from my heart chakra. And I just took his hand and I just sent it back to him. And it's like, whoa, how nice can he be if he's trying to steal energy? And he did it again. His arm came over. It was like stretched thin, but still there was a hand. And he came and he's trying to take energy, compassion, empathy, whatever, from my heart chakra. So I took his hand and sent it back to him again and telepathically told him to stop it. And I stayed away from him the rest of the evening, and that was it. So these things can happen, but with awareness and prayer and meditation and healing, we can deal with all of that. And I remember during the 80s in that house when I teach yoga, I could see like a white amoeba coming across the room and would land in my head. And, in the comic strips where they show somebody, like out of it and their eyes are going like this in the comic strip, that's the way it was because I had not healed yet and my self esteem was still quite low. And high self esteem, love for yourself, love generally is your protection. Love is protection. So I would have to work to get those thought forms out of my physical body because people in yoga class will release, and if you don't have good self-esteem, they're going to come to the person that they can victimize or vampirize. So that's a little bit about that. And I think those are all the stories that I have for you in this episode. All right. So I hope you're okay with all of that. It doesn't matter if you believe it or not, because I know it happened to me and I'm healed from it. So it served its purpose. So if you have any questions, you can contact me through my website, www.michellestaryoga.com, or email me at michellestaryoga@gmail. And if you want tarot reading or numerology, or join me on yoga online, live online. We have classes and we have great fun on Zoom. So I hope you have peaceful dreams. If you feel a little uh, out of sorts about this, then just surround yourself with white light or blue light. If white light is too stark for you, blue is the color of peace, and you can take it through. Here's some blue right here, and there's blue next to me with my roller back there. Um, you can use that blue to bring peacefulness and to just calm yourself down, all right, if you need to. So thank you for listening and joining me. The next episode will be meeting angels and guides in meditation. So that should be fun too. All right. So thanks again. I will see you next time. Namaste, everybody.